weather briefing, and we are honored to have new graduate student Paul Mykolajtchuk here, former vice president of the campus weather service and former head of forecasting. So he has his roots in CWS and has done plenty with the weather briefing. So let's have him kick it off.
All right, well, thanks for that introduction, Jake. So I kind of wanted to start off here by kind of looking at what happened in the past. And on this date, 13 years ago, we had this in the Gulf of Mexico, actually. And this is Hurricane Katrina, of course. And Hurricane Katrina was rapidly intensifying at this point and was barreling toward the Gulf shore. Certainly a very stark contrast from what we're seeing right now in the Gulf, with not too much going on. But we're actually going to take a look at the tropics to see if there's any kind of changes that might be coming and what might those changes be as a result of. But first, we're going to be looking at back home here. And I kind of was talking with Jake a little bit before the briefing started. It looks to me as when these cumulus clouds start to pop up, it looks to be some kind of gravity waves that are in the mix here. We do see the low-level valley fog as well in the morning. And we've had this valley fog pretty consistently. This valley fog has been with us for the last few days or so, and that's been a pretty persistent pattern, kind of a temperature inversion in the morning with pretty good low-level moisture and pretty light surface winds here. Not really a whole lot to speak of when it comes to the radar here, and radar really isn't showing too much, and it's really just showing a lot of bugs and kind of debris and that kind of thing. So we're really not seeing too much in the way of radar right now. Today, we're really not going to be seeing too much in the way of showers. But we're going to take a look at see if we're going to see any showers over the next few days or so. And to do that, let's look at some high-res guidance here. So this is the NAM3K, and I just looked at the most recent run here. So this is a 12Z run that just came in, actually. And we'll roll forward here to Wednesday, and we do have a frontal feature kind of moving through, and we can see that with the reflectivity here. The reflectivity does become sort of impressive, actually, when you get into northwestern PA. This is valid at 7 p.m. on August 29th. That's tomorrow. And by the time it reaches State College, though, kind of fizzles out, and that's kind of to be expected because winds are from the northwest. So your storm motion is going from the northwest to the southeast. When that happens, the storm motion is going to downslope over the mountains. When you downslope, you have sinking air. When you have sinking air, that's not good for thunderstorms. So chances are, if there's going to be anything, it is going to be to the west of here. The Storm Prediction Center does have a marginal risk west of here, but only general risk for our area. I also did want to talk about the forecast for the next several days or so. So we can take a look at the dew point, because the real change behind this front is actually going to be a dew point change. So we can really see that here on the NAM3K. So we do try to get those greens into northern PA. We'll look at the GFS, though, to kind of get a longer term dew point change. So we do get into those blues, we do get into those 50s by the time Friday rolls around. But it's pretty short-lived, actually. By the time Friday afternoon rolls around, we're already back into the middle 60s with dew points. So the real impact with this front is really going to be a slightly drier air mass to start off your day on Friday, but it's really just going to rebound pretty quickly after that. And looking at temperatures here over the next several days, today's going to be the warmest day, and we do have heat advisories out for eastern Pennsylvania. We do have heat advisories for much of the coastal plain, actually, and as a result of forecasted 90+ degree temperatures and forecasted heat indices above 100 degrees. And that's resulting in those heat advisories out for places east of here. But notice even for State College, with those dew points that are really soupy out there, it's definitely going to be feeling like it's above 90 degrees out there. So over the next few days, we are going to be seeing kind of warmer than normal temperatures compared to what we would typically see. And but when that front rolls through, we do see temperatures kind of moderating. We are going to get to Saturday, though, and Saturday is probably the most interesting day. Unfortunately, it looks like we could be dealing with an east flow, and of course, when we have an east flow in this part of the country, that usually means a lot of low-level clouds. I'll get to that in just a second here, but I wanted to look at the larger picture here. So currently, we do have a southwesterly flow. We have this ridge right here, this ridge of high pressure off to our southeast, and that's giving us that southwesterly flow here. And that's going to continue for the next couple of days. But here's our front right here, and that's going to swing off to the east. But pay attention to this high pressure right here. As that high pressure slides off to the east, you're going to get low-level east flow. When you get low-level east flows, we were saying before, you're getting the flow right off the ocean. The flow is going to upslope, probably some low-level clouds. So we'll take a look at this high pressure here. This is now 18Z on Friday, and this is now 12Z on Saturday. So notice this high is off to our east. And as a result, one would expect, if you look at the low-level winds, that the low-level winds are out of the east. So let's take a look at that right here. 10-meter wind, and it is. So if you look closely here, the wind barbs are definitely pointing to the northwest. That means that the winds are coming from the southeast. And notice where that wind is coming straight off of the ocean, actually. And so that's going to really bring some of that moisture further inland. And let's take a look at a forecast sounding here for central PA. This is 12Z on Saturday. This is 8 a.m. on Saturday. Game is at 3:30 p.m. on Saturday. Look at that. Your dew point and temperature are really close together in much of the lower part of the atmosphere. So when you're waking up at 8 a.m. on Saturday, chances are there's probably going to be a lot of low-level cloudiness. Do note, though, how dry it is at around 700 millibars here and about 800 millibars. So chances are you're not going to get any kind of deep convection or anything like that on Saturday. Even if we roll forward here, notice we do have that temperature and the dew point pretty close together here. This run is a little more optimistic than previous runs. It does get temperatures up to the mid-70s, 74, but do note that we're probably going to be dealing with low-level cloudiness and still really dry aloft. So even though we have most unstable cave approaching 1,000 joules per kilogram, chances are we're not going to really see anything pop up, especially because of all this dry air aloft here. So to me, what I see for the game is temperatures probably getting to the lower 70s for the afternoon, lower to middle 70s, and probably dealing with a lot of low-level cloudiness though. Maybe some drizzle in the morning. If we look at the Gfs precipitation depiction here, the GFS has been pretty consistent in showing this kind of speckled nature with the precipitation that you see right there. In central Pennsylvania here, we do have kind of scattered, drizzly, shower kind of precipitation depiction there. But it's certainly not going to be a washout. So I do see that there's probably going to be some kind of maybe mist in the morning. Probably tries to redeem itself a little bit into the day, but certainly there could be some drizzle in the morning. Probably mostly dry for the game, but certainly not a 10 out of 10 day for sure. So kind of shifting gears a lot, actually. I did want to also talk about the European model here. And the reason why I want to show this is actually a little further away from home. It's the entire North Atlantic now. I actually took a look at this morning and was a little bit surprised to see what it showed at day 10 here. So of course, day 10 model forecasts have to be taken with a grain of salt because there's a lot of uncertainty once you get this far out. However, it's important to kind of try to take away maybe a general idea of what could happen with the forecast down the road here. So let's look at the European here. So you can kind of see where I'm trying to get at here by the time we get to day 10. Okay, so we're in the Atlantic here, and we now have 4 tropical cyclones in the Euro by the end of the run. That's quite a shift from what we've been seeing earlier this season, where we really haven't been seeing a lot in the way of tropical activity in the Atlantic. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 right here. So what might be causing this uptick in tropical activity? So I tried to look at some of the longer range forecasts, and this is actually the JMA weeklies right here. So this was made on August 22nd. So this is a 17 to 30 day forecast. This is weeks 3 and 4, but actually I wanted to look at the first week first. And notice we have different colors over the Atlantic here. So the first week we have these kind of orangey yellow colors over the Atlantic. We're looking at this top left panel here on the JMA weeklies. This shows vertical motion at 200 millibars. So this shows vertical motion really high up in the atmosphere. So when you see these positive kind of oranges and yellow colors, that indicates sinking motion aloft. That's pretty poor pattern for a tropical cyclone development. But do pay attention to these blues right here as we shift to the second week. So the blues are shifting to the east. And so here is the week 2 forecast. So this is the day 10 to 16 forecast. So this was made on August 22nd though. So this is no longer a day 10 to 16 forecast. So the time period that we're looking at here is now about 4 to 10 days now at this point, because we're about 6 days ahead here on the 28th. Then we look at the 3rd and 4th week. And by the time we get to the 3rd and the 4th week here, we do have more upward motion aloft in the Atlantic, and that would, of course, be more favorable. Also take a look at Africa here, actually, because a lot of the tropical cyclone genesis comes from a lot of these African waves that move from east to west, and we do have upward motion over Africa now, so that's really important. And at this point, that's a day 17 to 30 forecast, but again, we're a little bit further ahead in time. So that time period that forecast is for is actually now only about 10 days into the future. 10 days, that also happens to be this 10 days right here, where the Euro is showing 4 named tropical cyclones. So again, this is a pretty big shift if this were to take place. And it should be noted, kind of anecdotally, I have noticed that the European does tend to be a little, when it comes to tropical cyclone formation, a little less aggressive compared to the GFS. So if the Euro is showing a lot of tropical cyclone formation, that usually is a pretty big red flag to me. Probably over the next 10 days or so, there probably will be some named storms forming. So here's another look. This is from Mike Ventris' website here. This is kind of showing the same thing here. We do currently have sinking motion over the Atlantic. Again, that's what those positive values mean. And the negative values, of course, mean that's where you have upward motion. So this is essentially swinging over to the east. And we have sinking motion into the Pacific here. So everything's kind of moving from west to east here. So that could be MJO related, but certainly it's often a little difficult to tell because there's a lot going on with regard to the upward motion field. So speaking of that, and speaking of the tropics, I did want to talk about El Nino for a little bit. So this is looking at average 850 millibar zonal wind anomalies here. So essentially, where you see blues are showing where you have winds that are stronger than normal from the east, and where you see oranges and reds, that's where you have weaker than normal winds from the east. Essentially, that's what this is showing. So the way I like to look at this is that if you have if you're on a road, right, and there are faster cars that are catching up to slower cars, what's going to happen? There's going to be a lot of convergence with the traffic, right? So in this case, we have stronger than normal easterlies here, catching up to slower than normal easterlies. So this is where a lot of the convergence is happening here in the tropical Pacific. Or this is where it's forecasted to happen. So there's been a lot of talk about El Nino, about how El Nino might be developing, and about how El Nino might be progressing down the road here. So I did want to look at the current observations here. So this is, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the Nino regions, let me just quickly pull that up here. Okay, so this right here. So essentially, if you're looking at the Nino 1+2 region, that's about the furthest east. The Nino 3 region is slightly further west. Nino 3.4 slightly further west. Nino 4 slightly further west. So this right here is showing Nino 1+2 right here, and that's actually -0.2. This is showing Nino 3. This is showing Nino 3.4. This is showing Nino 4. And essentially what we're seeing here is that the water relative to normal is warmest the further west you go. And so for some of you who have looked at some kind of long-term winter forecasts and looked at which kind of Ninos typically lead to snowy winters, mostly, but not always, you usually see the warmest water relative to average pretty far west. And there are exceptions to that rule, though. There have been Ninos where we have had that water pretty far west that was pretty warm, but we still had a warmer than normal winter here. And so, of course, nothing is definite here. There's a lot that can change. But certainly, when it comes to what we're looking at right now, we could be seeing more in the way of a westerly El Nino. We're also going to look at the subsurface as well, just to kind of see how this El Nino has been progressing here. So essentially, this is your sea surface temperatures. I did want to point one thing out here. So notice this warmer than normal water here in the central tropical Atlantic. Even though we do have warming waters here in the tropical Atlantic here, because the warmest water relative to average is actually right here, that's where your strongest upward motion relative to average is also going to be. So if you have strong upward motion relative to average there, right adjacent to that, you're going to have downward motion. Stronger downward motion relative to average. So even though the waters have warmed in the tropical Atlantic, it's still overall an unfavorable look for the tropical Atlantic when it comes to overall how active is this season going to be. That being said, like we were saying before, over the next week to 10 days, it's likely based on the changes we're seeing with how upward motion aloft is taking place. Probably there's going to be some kind of shift in the tropics. And of course, like we were saying before, though, how exactly that changes is still uncertain. We're still pretty far out here. So I thought this was kind of interesting. This is the subsurface this is the current subsurface for the El Nino here. And I was actually kind of taking a look at some of the other years to see if there's any kind of similarities between this El Nino, or not exactly an El Nino yet, but we're trending toward an El Nino and other years in the past here. So this is a depth analysis here. So essentially we're looking at the tropical Pacific right here, and we're looking at the depth below the tropical Pacific. So essentially this is the surface right here, and we're looking at depth below the surface, essentially. And so here's your sea surface temperatures right here. Here's your sea surface temperature anomalies. This is kind of similar to what we were looking at before, though, at the surface right here. There's colder water to the east and warmer than normal water to the west. So now the question is, what kind of an El Nino might this be if an El Nino does develop? And so I was kind of looking at some of this stuff in the past here. And of course, you have the really strong El Nino in 1997, 1998. You also had a really strong El Nino in 2015, 2016. And so I kind of wanted to look at how that compares to where we were at this time in 2015. So here's what 2015 looked like. And while it's loading, you know, kind of just a spoiler alert here, it's a lot different actually. And there's a lot of warmer than normal water off to the east here, some cooler than normal water to the west. But with this particular situation, we have some more warmer water to the west and some cooler water to the east. So again, this is 2015. And kind of looking at 1997 as well, here's a look at what that looked like. And we'll pull that up right here. And we'll kind of see what 1997 looked like in comparison to 2015. And it looks very similar to 2015, essentially. So this was the 1997 depiction. Of course, this is one of the strongest El Ninos on record. So, of course, if you have an El Nino in the tropical Pacific, that normally does shut down a lot of tropical activity in the Atlantic, because again, where there's a lot of warmer than normal water, that's where a lot of upward motion relative to average is going to be. And again, what comes up must come down. So tendency for stronger wind shear in the Caribbean and sinking motion over the Atlantic is more typical during an El Nino. But again, the point is that so far the way things are playing out, this is pretty different compared to the 1997 situation and pretty different compared to what we saw in 2015. That's basically what I wanted to show here. And we can actually look at some of the other years here too. So we can look at 2002, that was a weak to moderate El Nino. It's kind of interesting though, because when I was looking at this, I couldn't really find a year that best matched what we're seeing right now. So this is the 2002 El Nino. So you can kind of see that with the subsurface here. We have some warmer than normal water further east. Again, with the current situation, it's further west. And so essentially, again, how this plays out, if we have the warmer than normal water further west, which so far it looks like that's the case, that has an impact for the winter, that has an impact for the hurricane season. If the warmer than normal water is pretty far west, then that actually would not be a detriment when it comes to Atlantic tropical cyclones forming. And I did want to take a look at the Euro ensemble here. And let's see if we can pull up the model lab here. One last thing here. And I kind of wanted to look at the tropical Atlantic. All right, tropical Atlantic, and let's look at the 500 spaghetti here, the tropical Atlantic for the Euro ensemble. Oh, if we look right here, we can kind of see there's this first disturbance right here in the Euro ensemble right here. So we do have the ensemble mean in this orange right here. This white line right here is the operational, and this green line is what you would climatologically expect. So we have these kind of tropical waves rolling off of Africa here, and you can see there's a lot. The Euro ensemble is saying that there could be something to watch here with this particular tropical disturbance. And if you look right here, there's also another disturbance kind of on the heels. So this isn't just the Euro operational saying this. This is the Euro ensemble also saying this. You can see there's actually one member right here that has a closed off 576 decimeter height, so it's showing a pretty substantial system. There are also some systems in the Gulf here where the Euro operational is saying maybe there could be something. But if we look, the key takeaway message I want to have here with regard to the Euro ensemble is look at how there isn't a lot going on here. And there is a lot of ensemble spread as we get really far out. Obviously, it's a pretty messy look as we get to about day 12 here. But the Euro ensemble on average is saying the tropical Atlantic is going to get a lot more active compared to where we have seen it. So this isn't just the Euro operational, this isn't just the GFS operational. This is the Euro ensemble kind of saying that there is a lot to kind of look out here on the when it comes to the 500 millibar spaghettis here. So again, you have these kind of, it's definitely kind of hard to see, but you have another disturbance here, and then you have another disturbance kind of coming off of Africa right here. And again, you can see that it's quite different compared to what you would expect climatologically. And again, there's a lot of variability, of course, but when it comes to what we're seeing now, there's a big change kind of coming down the road. And with that, I'd be happy to take your questions.
Questions for Paul?
Paul, what do you think about the front clearing our area on Thursday? How fast will we get?
So whenever I see a ridge off to the southeast, I'm always a little leery of how quickly the front always progresses to the southeast. I always tend to think that the front is probably going to encounter some kind of resistance to the southeast. So let's take a look at this here. So yeah, we have a ridge to the southeast here. Normally, I would go ever so slightly slower compared to what the models are saying. Let's take a look at the, let's go to the GFS here. Let's go to the, let's see. Actually, let's stick with the dew points here. So the front is kind of best seen with the dew point gradient here. And of course, there's more than one way to find a front, but in this case, so the front is trying to sag its way to the south here on Thursday into Friday. I probably would go a little bit slower though, just because we have that ridge off to the east, and just from my experience, fronts tend to be a little bit slower than forecast whenever you have a ridge to the southeast.
I have a question for you, Paul.
Yes, sir.
Not weather related. How about a score prediction for Saturday?
Score prediction. I think we're going to get the W. I think we're going to win by, let's say, 3 touchdowns.
All right. Any other questions for Paul? All right, let's thank him one more time. And then next week we'll have Dr. John Neese.